What happens when a decorated war hero steps into a courtroom carrying a truth so heavy that even Judge Frank Caprio goes silent? This isn't just another traffic case. This is the moment a Marine, broken by battles no one saw, stood before the bench in Providence, and the entire room felt the weight of what he'd survived. You're watching Case Closed, the channel where justice isn't just handed down, it's felt. Before we dive into this powerful story, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments, when was the last time someone showed you mercy when you needed it most? Because what happens next will remind you why compassion still matters. Marcus Webb sat quietly in the back row, hands shaking as he clutched a worn manila folder, the kind soldiers use when they bring home pieces of a past they'd rather leave overseas. His navy blue two-piece suit hung loose on his frame. He'd lost nearly 30 pounds since he returned home. War takes many things: sleep, peace, weight. But in Marcus's case, it had taken something deeper. Around him, the courtroom buzzed with ringing phones, whispered strategies, and nervous defendants flipping through paperwork. But Marcus didn't move. He stared straight ahead at the empty bench where Judge Caprio would soon sit. His charges were simple on paper: expired registration and no insurance. But nothing in that folder was simple. Inside it were the pieces of a life that had been pushed beyond its breaking point. His honorable discharge from the Marine Corps, medical evaluations from the VA, a letter from his commanding officer, and photographs, the kind that haunt you long after the shutter closes. At 9:15 a.m., the bailiff, a heavy-set man named Derek Thompson, called the courtroom to order. Marcus took a breath. His truth was finally about to be heard. Everyone stood as Judge Frank Caprio entered, his black robe flowing behind him, his reading glasses perched on his nose. At 78 years old, Judge Caprio had presided over this courtroom for decades, earning a reputation for fairness, compassion, and an uncanny ability to see through to the truth of every situation that appeared before him. Share this video with a veteran in your life who needs to know their community still cares about them. The first few cases moved quickly. A parking ticket dismissed. A speeding violation reduced. A young college student given community service instead of a fine she couldn't afford. Marcus watched it all, his military training keeping his posture straight, his expression neutral, but inside his stomach churned. He hadn't eaten breakfast, couldn't afford it. The $12 in his checking account needed to last until his disability check arrived in 6 days. Case number 74392, Marcus Jonathan Webb. The court clerk's voice echoed through the room. Marcus stood, his legs unsteady for just a moment before muscle memory kicked in. He walked to the defendant's podium with the deliberate pace of someone who'd marched in formation for years.
Across military bases from Camp Pendleton to Kandahar, Judge Caprio looked down at his paperwork, then up at Marcus, his experienced eyes taking in details most people would miss: the military bearing, the visible tension in Marcus's jaw, the way his right hand trembled slightly before he clasped both hands behind his back. "Mr. Webb," Judge Caprio began, his distinctive Rhode Island accent, warm but authoritative, "I see here you're cited for operating a vehicle with expired registration and no proof of insurance. How do you plead?" "Guilty, Your Honor." Marcus's voice was steady, clear, respectful. "Okay, can you tell me what happened? Why were these things expired?" This was the moment Marcus swallowed hard. In combat, he'd faced enemy fire without flinching. He'd led his squad through situations that would haunt him forever. But standing in this courtroom, about to expose his vulnerabilities to a room full of strangers, required a different kind of courage. "Your Honor, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I came home 14 months ago." He paused, his voice catching slightly. "I've been having some difficulties with the transition." Judge Caprio leaned forward, his expression shifting from judicial neutrality to something softer. "What kind of difficulties, son?" If this story is hitting you, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Marcus opened his folder with hands that now shook visibly. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to explain my situation, please." "Take your time." The courtroom had grown quiet. People who'd been scrolling through their phones were now watching. The young prosecutor, Amanda Chen, a 28-year-old assistant district attorney who'd walked in ready to request the standard fines, found herself leaning against her table, her prepared remarks forgotten. "I was a squad leader, Your Honor. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, my last deployment. We were conducting security operations in Helmand Province. On March 17th, 2 years ago, my vehicle hit an IED." Marcus's voice remained steady, but his eyes had focused on something far away, something only he could see. "I was the only survivor." A woman in the gallery gasped softly. Judge Caprio removed his glasses, setting them on the bench. "4 men died that day, Your Honor. Corporal James Mitchell, 23 years old, from Ohio. He was getting married that summer. Lance Corporal Deshaun Harris, 21, from Detroit. He had a daughter he'd only met once. Private First Class Kyle Rodriguez, 19, from Texas. Kid wanted to be a teacher. And Sergeant Thomas Bradley, 29, from right here in Rhode Island. He had 2 kids and a wife named Sarah. Drop a comment right now and tell us the name of a veteran who made a difference in your life." Marcus pulled out a photograph from his folder. His hands shook harder. "This is us, Your Honor. Taken 3 days before the explosion. That's Tommy Bradley on my right. He was my best friend. We enlisted together. We promised each other we'd
Make it home. Judge Caprio accepted the photograph from the bailiff. He studied it for a long moment. 5 young men in desert camouflage, arms around each other, smiling despite the harsh sun and the ever-present danger. They looked invincible. They looked like boys. "I tried to save them, Your Honor." Marcus's voice cracked now, the carefully maintained composure beginning to fracture. "The vehicle was on fire. I could hear them. I could hear Tommy calling for help, but I couldn't get to them. My leg was pinned. By the time they cut me out, everyone was gone." The courtroom was absolutely silent now. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, her hands frozen over the keys, tears streaming down her face. "I came home with a Purple Heart and a combat action ribbon, and shrapnel still embedded in my spine that the doctors say is too dangerous to remove. I get migraines that last for days. I have nightmares every single night. And I have PTSD that the VA says is service-connected at 90% disability. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because Judge Caprio's response will change everything." Marcus pulled out more documents, medical records, prescription bottles, letters from the VA. "I've been trying to get treatment, Your Honor, but the VA system is backed up. My first psychiatry appointment isn't for another 4 months. I'm on a wait list for intensive therapy. In the meantime, I'm taking 7 different medications just to function." Judge Caprio's face had transformed. The judge was gone. In his place sat a father, a grandfather, a human being confronted with the cost of war written on the face of a young man who'd given everything for his country. "Mr. Webb, this explains the situation, but I need to understand specifically about the vehicle violations. Can you walk me through that?" Marcus nodded, pulling out more papers. "Yes, Your Honor. When I got home, I moved back in with my mother, Patricia Webb, here in Providence. She's a nurse at Rhode Island Hospital. Single mom, raised me and my sister by herself. She's in the gallery today." Heads turned to see a small woman in her 50s wearing scrubs under a winter coat, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son lay bare his struggles. "I've been trying to find work, Your Honor, but the nightmares, the migraines, the flashbacks, they make it hard to hold down a job. I had a position at a warehouse, but I had a panic attack when a forklift backfired. Sounded like an explosion. I hit the ground and covered my head in front of everyone. They let me go the next day."
Share this video right now with someone who needs to see what real justice looks like. I had a job at a call center, but the fluorescent lights triggered my migraines so badly I couldn't see straight. I had to leave after 2 weeks. I've applied to 73 positions in the last year, Your Honor. I have the rejection emails printed out. 73 companies that looked at my resume and said, "No thanks." The young prosecutor, Amanda Chen, was openly crying now.
mascara running down her cheeks. This was not what she'd expected when she'd reviewed the case file that morning over coffee. My disability check from the VA is $847 a month, Your Honor. My medications, even with VA coverage, cost me $230 monthly. My mom won't take rent from me, but I try to contribute to groceries when I can. The insurance on my car, a 2006 Honda Civic with 170,000 miles, was $152 a month. The registration renewal was $87. Marcus's voice grew softer, the shame evident in every word. 3 months ago, Your Honor, Tommy Bradley's widow, Sarah, she called me. She was struggling. Tommy's life insurance had run out. She had medical bills from when their youngest son was sick. She was about to lose their house. The house Tommy bought because he promised her he'd always take care of her. Judge Caprio's eyes closed briefly. And when they opened, they glistened with unshed tears. I couldn't let that happen, Your Honor. I couldn't let Tommy's family lose their home when he died trying to protect mine. So I sent Sarah everything I could. I let my insurance lapse. I didn't renew my registration. I figured I'd only drive when absolutely necessary, early mornings, late nights, just to get to my VA appointments and help my mom with errands. If your heart is breaking right now, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us why veterans deserve better. On October 23rd, I was driving my mother home from her night shift at the hospital at 6:30 in the morning. She'd worked a double 16 hours straight. I didn't want her taking the bus. That's when Officer Michael Sullivan pulled me over and discovered the expired registration and no insurance. Marcus pulled out one final document. This is the receipt, Your Honor. I sent Sarah Bradley $3,200 over those 3 months. It was enough to catch up her mortgage payments. She sent me this letter last week. The bailiff brought the letter to Judge Caprio. The judge read it aloud, his voice thick with emotion. Dear Marcus, I don't have words to thank you for what you've done. You saved our home. You kept Tommy's promise when he couldn't. My boys still have a place to grow up, to remember their father. They are their hero, just like you were Tommy's. We are praying for you every single day. Please take care of yourself. Tommy would want that. He loved you like a brother. Love, Sarah, Michael, and little Tommy Jr. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Several people in the gallery were crying openly now. Judge Caprio set the letter down carefully, as if it were made of glass. Mr. Webb, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be
Completely honest with me. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at his mother in the gallery, then back at Judge Caprio. Sometimes, Your Honor. His voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes I think my guys got the better deal. They don't have to live with what we saw. They don't have to feel guilty for surviving. They don't have nightmares about the things we had to do. Subscribe right now if you believe what Judge Caprio does next is exactly what this veteran needs. Judge Caprio stood up from his bench, an almost unheard of action. He looked at his bailiff. Derek, I'm calling a 15-minute recess. Mr. Webb, I need you to stay right where you are. Amanda, come up here, please. The prosecutor approached the bench. Judge Caprio spoke quietly to her, but in the silence of the courtroom, many could hear fragments. Dismiss everything. Not just reduce. Dismiss. I don't care about procedure. Find a way. Amanda Chen nodded vigorously, wiping her eyes. Already writing it up, Your Honor. Consider it done. Judge Caprio turned to his clerk. Rachel, I need you to get me a list of every veteran service organization in Providence and call Dr. Robert Martinez at the VA. Tell him I need him to call me immediately. Tell him it's an emergency. But the judge wasn't done. He stepped down from his bench, his robe swirling behind him, and approached Marcus Webb directly. This was unprecedented. Judges don't leave their benches during proceedings. They maintain judicial distance. They don't get personally involved. Frank Caprio wasn't interested in precedent right now. He stood directly in front of Marcus, this young man who'd given everything. And he did something that would be replayed millions of times online. He embraced him. The 78-year-old judge wrapped his arms around the 34-year-old veteran and held him as Marcus Webb finally completely broke down. "You're a hero, son," Judge Caprio said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You hear me? You're a hero. Not just for what you did over there, for what you're doing right here. For taking care of your brother's family, for taking care of your mother, for still fighting even when everything feels impossible." Marcus sobbed against the judge's shoulder, his whole body shaking with the force of emotions he'd been holding back for months, for years. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as this moment of raw humanity unfolded before them. If you're not crying right now, you're not human. Hit that subscribe button and share this with everyone you know. Judge Caprio pulled back, his hands on Marcus's shoulders. "Look at me, Marcus. Look at me. You are not alone. You hear me? You are not alone anymore." He turned to the courtroom gallery. "Is Sarah Bradley here today?" Tommy Bradley's widow. A slender woman in her early 30s stood up in the back, her hand clutching those
two small boys. She'd driven 3 hours from Rhode Island to be here, wanting to support the man who'd saved her home. "Mrs. Bradley, could you come forward, please?" Sarah Bradley walked down the aisle, her sons, ages 7 and 4, following uncertainly. When she reached the front, she looked at Marcus and without a word, she hugged him too. "Tommy would be so proud of you," she whispered. "He always said you were the best of us." Young Michael Bradley, 7 years old with his father's eyes, looked up at Marcus. "Are you Uncle Marcus? Mommy says you're a hero, just like Daddy." Marcus knelt down, tears streaming down his face, and looked at this little boy who would grow up without his father. "Your daddy was the hero, buddy. I just try to be like him." Little Tommy Jr., only 4, offered Marcus his stuffed bear. "Mr. Fluffles helps when I'm sad about Daddy. You can borrow him." If that doesn't hit you in the heart, nothing will. Comment below with the name of a hero in your life. The courtroom was completely undone now. The bailiff was crying, the court reporter had given up pretending to work. Even the police officer who'd written the original citation, Michael Sullivan, stood in the back with tears running down his face. He'd had no idea. He'd just been doing his job that morning, running plates, enforcing the law. He'd been professional, but firm. Now he felt like he'd kicked a man who was already on the ground. Judge Caprio let this moment breathe. He understood that what was happening here was more important than dockets and schedules and the 50 other cases waiting to be heard. This was about human connection, about community, about making sure that people who sacrifice everything don't fall through the cracks. "Marcus, all your charges are dismissed completely. You owe nothing." "But I'm not done, not even close." Judge Caprio turned to his clerk again. "Rachel, I want you to contact every news outlet in Providence. I want Marcus's story told. I want people to know what our veterans are going through and what we can do to help." He looked at Officer Sullivan in the back. "Officer, come up here, please." Sullivan approached nervously, unsure if he was about to be reprimanded. "Officer Sullivan, you did your job. You did nothing wrong. But I'm going to ask you to do something extra. I want you to personally escort Mr. Webb to the VA hospital today. I want you to walk him into the director's office if you have to. I want you to make sure he gets the help he needs, and I want you to report back to me. Can you do that? Drop a like if you love seeing people step up like this." Sullivan nodded emphatically. "Absolutely, Your Honor. It would be my privilege." Judge Caprio turned to the gallery. "Is there anyone from the Veterans of Foreign Wars here
Today, American Legion, any veteran service organizations? An older man in his 60s wearing a VFW cap stood up. "I'm here, Your Honor. Richard Morrison, VFW Post 23.
Mr. Morrison, I want your organization to take Mr. Webb under your wing. I want you to help him navigate the VA system. I want you to connect him with employment resources. I want you to make sure he's never alone in this fight again. Can you do that? Consider it done, Your Honor. We take care of our own. But Judge Caprio still wasn't finished. He looked at his longtime friend Anthony Carnival, who ran a successful construction company and was in court that day for an unrelated matter. Anthony, you're hiring. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Anthony Carnival stood up, a broad smile crossing his face. He knew Frank Caprio well enough to know when to just say yes. We absolutely are, Judge. Mr. Webb, you come see me this week. We'll find a position that works with your medical needs, flexible schedule, good benefits, and a team that respects what you've done for this country. The courtroom burst into applause. Marcus stood there, overwhelmed, unable to process what was happening. This morning, he'd walked in expecting fines he couldn't pay and possibly a suspended license. That would have been devastating. Instead, he was witnessing an entire community mobilize around him. Share this video with someone who needs to see a community come together like this. Judge Caprio held up his hand for quiet. I'm still not done, Marcus. I'm personally going to make some calls. I have friends at the VA. I have friends in veterans advocacy. You're going to get the psychiatric care you need, and you're not going to wait 4 months. I'm going to make sure you're seen within 2 weeks. I'm also going to connect you with a PTSD specialist who works specifically with combat veterans. He paused, his voice growing softer but more intense. But Marcus, I need something from you. I need you to promise me that you're going to keep fighting. I need you to promise me that when those dark thoughts come, you're going to reach out. You have my direct number now. Rachel is writing it down for you. You call me. Doesn't matter what time, doesn't matter what day. You call me. You understand? Marcus nodded, unable to speak through his tears. Say it, son. Say you promise. I promise, Your Honor. Say it again, louder. Let everyone in this room hear you. Marcus straightened up, his Marine Corps training taking over, his voice growing stronger. I promise, sir. I promise I'll keep fighting. The courtroom erupted in applause again, longer this time, more thunderous. People stood up. Sarah Bradley hugged Marcus again, her own tears soaking his shoulder. Her sons clung to his legs. Marcus's mother pushed through the crowd and wrapped her arms around her son, sobbing with relief and gratitude. If this doesn't restore your faith in humanity, nothing will. Subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a story like this. But the most extraordinary moment was yet to come. Judge Caprio reached into his own wallet and pulled out $300 in cash. Marcus, this is to get your registration renewed and your insurance reinstated. This is not charity. This is a community investment in someone who invested everything in us. Officer Sullivan stepped forward. Your Honor, I'd like to contribute too. He pulled out $60. It's all I have on me, but I'll get more. Richard Morrison from the VFW approached. The VFW will cover whatever else is needed. Registration, insurance, we've got it. Amanda Chen, the prosecutor, stepped forward with $40. Please, I want to help too. What happened next would become the defining image of the entire proceeding. One by one, people from the courtroom gallery came forward. The court reporter, the bailiff, other defendants waiting for their cases, attorneys, random citizens who'd come to pay parking tickets. They formed a line, each placing money on the defendant's table. 10s and 20s and 5s and ones. A pile of cash growing steadily as a community demonstrated what it means to support those who've served. By the time the line ended, there was over $2,000 on the table. Marcus stared at it in disbelief. I can't accept this. This is too much. Judge Caprio smiled, and it was the smile of a man who just witnessed the best of humanity. Yes, you can, Marcus, and yes, you will. You gave everything for us. Let us give something back. The extra money, you use it to get yourself back on your feet. You use it to take your mother out to a nice dinner. You use it to buy yourself some groceries. You use it however you need to use it.
Comment below and tell us what you would do to help a veteran in your community. The judge looked around his courtroom at all these people who'd come together spontaneously to support a stranger. This is what America is supposed to be. This is what it means to be a community. We take care of each other, especially those who've taken care of us. He turned back to Marcus. You're gonna be okay, son. You hear me? You're going to be okay. It's not gonna be easy. Some days are gonna be really hard, but you're not facing those days alone anymore. You've got an entire community behind you now. You've got brothers and sisters who will walk through fire for you, just like you walk through fire for us. Marcus finally found his voice, though it shook with emotion. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, everyone. I don't know what to say. I walked in here this morning thinking my life was over. I thought I was going to lose my license, lose the ability to help my mom, lose everything. Instead, you've all
Given me hope. You've given me a reason to keep fighting. He looked at Sarah and her boys. Tommy always told me that if anything happened to him, I had to promise to live a good life. He said I had to promise to be happy, to find purpose, to make it mean something. I've been failing at that promise. But today, all of you have shown me that maybe I can keep it. Maybe I can honor him by accepting help, by being part of a community, by letting people care about me the way I tried to care for his family. Share this video right now. Veterans everywhere need to see this. Judge Caprio stepped forward and shook Marcus's hand formally. You've honored your friend every single day by staying alive, by taking care of his family, by being the kind of man worth looking up to. Don't you ever forget that. Your story isn't over, Marcus Webb. This is just the beginning of your next chapter. The judge returned to his bench and made a formal pronouncement for the record. In the matter of Case 74392, the State of Rhode Island versus Marcus Jonathan Webb, all charges are hereby dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, this court orders that Mr. Webb's record be expunged of these citations completely. They will not appear on any background check, any insurance inquiry, any employment screening. As far as the law is concerned, this incident never happened. He banged his gavel once, the sound echoing through the hushed courtroom. We're adjourned. Marcus, you stay here. We're going to make sure you have everything you need before you leave this building. Over the next hour, that courtroom transformed into a veteran support center. Richard Morrison from the VFW sat with Marcus, filling out paperwork to get him connected with veteran employment programs, housing assistance, and mental health resources. Officer Sullivan made calls to his contacts at the VA, pulling strings, using his badge and his persistence to get Marcus moved up on waiting lists. Anthony Carnival discussed job options with Marcus, learning about his skills, his limitations, his needs. They agreed on a position as a project coordinator, office-based, flexible hours, starting at $50,000 a year with full benefits. Marcus would start the following Monday, giving him time to get his affairs in order. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Click that button right now. Judge Caprio worked his phone like a command setter, calling in favors from decades of relationships. By the end of that hour, he'd secured Marcus an appointment with Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a renowned PTSD specialist who worked with combat veterans for the following Wednesday. He'd also arranged for Marcus to attend a week-long intensive therapy retreat in Vermont, all expenses paid, scheduled to begin in 3 weeks. But perhaps most importantly, he'd connected Marcus with a support group of local veterans, all with combat experience, all dealing with PTSD and the challenges of reintegration. They met every Tuesday night at the VFW hall. Richard Morrison had texted the group about Marcus, and within minutes, 5 of them had shown up at the courthouse to meet their new brother. They stood in the hallway outside the courtroom. These men ranging in age from 30 to 70, representing conflicts from Vietnam to Iraq. They surrounded Marcus, talking, laughing, sharing phone numbers, making plans to meet for coffee, offering rides to appointments, creating an instant network of support. "You don't have to do this alone anymore, brother," said Danny Torres, a 42-year-old Army veteran who'd served in Iraq. Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. We get together, we talk, we help each other through the hard days. No judgment, just brothers who understand. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like he belonged somewhere, like he had a purpose. Like maybe, just maybe, he could survive this. After all, drop a comment telling us about a time someone gave you hope when you needed it most. Sarah Bradley and her boys stayed until the very end. Before she left, she pulled Marcus aside privately. "Tommy left you something," she said softly. "I've been holding on to it, waiting for the right time to give it to you. After today, I know this is that time." She pulled out a sealed envelope from her purse. Marcus's name was written on the front in Tommy's distinctive handwriting. His hand shook as he took it. "He wrote it before your last deployment. He told me if anything happened to him, I should give this to you when you needed it most. I think today is that day." Marcus waited until he was alone in his car before opening the letter. His mother had caught a ride home with one of the VFW members, giving him space. He sat in his old Honda Civic in the courthouse parking lot, the envelope in his trembling hands. The letter was dated 2 years and 3 months ago, written just days before they deployed. "Marcus, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it home. I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for breaking our promise. But I need you to understand something. I need you to hear this. If I died doing what we do, then I died doing something that mattered. I died protecting my brothers. I died protecting our country. I died for something bigger than myself. And there's honor in that. There's purpose in that. So I need you to promise me something. I need you to live, really live, not just survive. Don't let my death be the thing that breaks you. Let it be the thing that reminds you how precious life is. Take care of Sarah and the boys, but also take care of yourself. Find joy. Find love. Find purpose. Be happy. Marcus, that's not betraying me. That's honoring me."
Every day you choose to live fully is a day you're keeping my memory alive. I love you, brother. Simplify, Tommy. Marcus pressed the letter to his chest and wept. Not the desperate, broken tears of despair he'd cried so many times before. These were different. These were tears of release, of acceptance, of possibility. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because you need to hear how this story ends. 3 months later, Judge Frank Caprio received a letter. It was postmarked from Providence, written in careful handwriting on simple notebook paper. "Dear Judge Caprio, I wanted to update you on everything that's happened since that day in your courtroom. First, I want you to know that I'm still here. There have been hard days, but I kept my promise. Every time the darkness gets close, I remember standing in your courtroom, surrounded by people who cared, and I reach out for help. I call Danny Torres, or Richard Morrison, or sometimes even Officer Sullivan, who has become a good friend, and the darkness passes. I've been working for Anthony Carnival's construction company for 3 months now. He's been incredible. On my bad days when the migraines hit or the flashbacks get too intense, he lets me work from home or take the day off without any problems. He treats me with dignity and respect. And he's taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The job has given me purpose and stability. I'm saving money. I got my own apartment last month. It's small, but it's mine, and it feels like independence. I'm still living with the PTSD. It's not something that just goes away. But Dr. Warren has been teaching me coping strategies, tools to manage the flashbacks and nightmares. The intensive therapy retreat in Vermont was life-changing. I met other combat veterans dealing with the same struggles, and we formed bonds that I know will last forever. The Tuesday night support group at the VFW has become the highlight of my week. We've created our own brotherhood, our own squad. We look out for each other. When one of us is struggling, the rest of us rally around him. It's what I needed
without knowing I needed it. Sarah and the boys are doing well. She got a promotion at work, and the boys are thriving in school. I drive up to see them once a month. Young Michael is playing soccer now, and little Tommy Jr. is starting kindergarten. They still call me Uncle Marcus, and every time I see them, I feel Tommy's presence. I feel like I'm keeping my promise to him. My mother is healthier and happier now that she doesn't have to worry about me as much. We have dinner together every Sunday. She tells me every week how proud she is of me, not for what I did in the war, but for how I'm fighting now, for how I'm choosing life every single day. Hit that like button if you're proud of Marcus's progress. Judge Caprio.
I wanted to tell you something that happened last week. I was at the grocery store and I saw a young guy, probably mid-20s, wearing an Army combat veteran hat. He looked lost, defeated. I recognized that look because I've seen it in my mirror so many times. I walked up to him and started a conversation. His name is Andrew. He just got back from deployment 3 months ago. He's struggling with PTSD and can't find work. He feels isolated and alone. He was buying the cheapest food possible because his disability check barely covers his rent. I gave him my number. I told him about the Tuesday night support group. I told him about Anani's construction company and how they're always looking for good people. I told him about Dr. Warren and the resources at the VA. I told him Judge Caprio's story about how one man's compassion created ripples that are still spreading. Andrew came to the VFW meeting this week. He's already connected with 3 guys from the group. Anthony is meeting with him about a job on Monday. And he told me that running into me at that grocery store saved his life. He said he'd been planning to end it that night. He'd had everything arranged, but our conversation gave him hope. It gave him a reason to hold on one more day. Judge Caprio, you saved my life that day in your courtroom. And because you saved my life, I was there to save Andrew's. That's what ripples do. They spread outward, touching more and more lives. Your compassion created a chain reaction that's literally keeping people alive. I'll never be able to repay you for what you did, but I can pay it forward. I can be for others what you and that courtroom full of people were for me. I can create my own ripples. Thank you for seeing me as a human being instead of just a case number. Thank you for stopping everything to make sure I got the help I needed. Thank you for believing I was worth saving. You were right that day. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning. With deepest gratitude, Marcus Webb. P.S. I'm enclosing a photo. It's from the VFW meeting last Tuesday. That's me in the middle, surrounded by my brothers. That's Danny on my left, Richard on my right. That's Andrew in the front. We're all smiling. We're all still fighting. We're all still here because people like you refuse to let us fall through the cracks. Comment below and tell us how you're going to help a veteran this week. Judge Caprio kept that letter in his desk drawer. On difficult days when the weight of his position felt heavy, when the constant parade of human struggle and legal complications wore on him, he would take out Marcus's letter and read it. He would look at the photograph of those veterans, arms around each other, smiling despite their scars, both visible and invisible, and he would remember why he did this job. Not for the legal precedents or the orderly administration of justice. Those things mattered, but they weren't the heart of it. He did this job because sometimes, in that space between the law and life, there was an opportunity to see people, really see them, to understand their stories, to respond with compassion instead of just procedure. Marcus Webb had walked into his courtroom facing minor traffic violations. But those violations were symptoms of a much larger struggle, a battle that millions of veterans face when they come home to a country that thanks them for their service, but doesn't always follow through with meaningful support. What Judge Caprio did that day sent a message far beyond Providence Municipal Court. The video of the proceedings, filmed by the court's standard cameras, was posted online. Within days, it had been viewed 10 million times. Within weeks, 50 million. It sparked conversations about veteran care, PTSD support, and the gaps in our VA system. It inspired other judges to look deeper into the stories behind the cases before them. It motivated communities across the country to create their own veteran support networks. If this story moved you, share it with 5 people right now. But more than any of that, it reminded people of something fundamental. That behind every case number, every citation, every defendant, there's a human being with a story. And sometimes the most important thing we can do is stop everything, set aside the procedures and the rules and the normal way of doing things, and simply help. 6 months after that courtroom moment, Marcus Webb was promoted to Senior Project Coordinator at Carnival Construction. He was excelling at his job, managing teams, overseeing projects, earning respect from his colleagues. His PTSD was still present, still something he managed daily, but he had the tools and the support to cope with it. The nightmares came less frequently, the flashbacks were less intense. He'd learned to recognize his triggers and implement coping strategies before spiraling. He'd started dating Elena Rodriguez, a social worker he'd met through the VFW. She understood trauma. She understood the complexities of PTSD. She met him where he was, supporting his healing without trying to fix him. They took things slowly, building a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect. The Tuesday night support group had grown from 8 members to 23. Marcus had become one of the leaders, helping facilitate discussions, reaching out to new members, creating the kind of supportive environment that had saved his own life. He'd helped 7 other veterans find jobs, connected 11 to mental health resources, and talked 4 through suicidal crises. Subscribe right now because stories like this need to be told. Andrew, the young veteran Marcus had met in the grocery store, was thriving. He'd been working at Carnival Construction for 5 months. He'd moved into a better apartment. He was attending therapy regularly and had reconnected with his family. He'd told Marcus multiple times that their chance encounter had quite literally saved his life, and he was now paying it forward too, volunteering at a veteran crisis hotline 3 nights a week. Sarah Bradley had remarried, a good man named Kevin, who embraced her boys and honored Tommy's memory. Marcus had walked her down the aisle at her wedding, standing in for the brother who couldn't be there. The boys were happy, healthy, growing up, surrounded by love and support. They still called Marcus Uncle Marcus and spent 1 weekend a month at his apartment, playing video games and listening to stories about their father. Patricia Webb, Marcus's mother, had cut back her hours at the hospital. She no longer had to work double shifts constantly because her son was stable and independent. She joined a book club and started dating a kind man from church. She smiled more. She laughed more. The worry lines that had etched deep into her face were beginning to soften. Officer Michael Sullivan had become close friends with Marcus. They met for coffee every other week, and Sullivan had become an advocate within the police department for better training on mental health issues and veteran services. He'd personally connected 19 veterans to resources over the past 6 months, and the department had created a new position, a veteran liaison officer, specifically to help bridge the gap between law enforcement and veteran communities. Drop a comment telling us what changed in your life after watching this video. 1 year to the day after Marcus's court appearance, Judge Frank Caprio organized a special event. He invited Marcus, Sarah and her family, Officer Sullivan, the VFW members, Anthony Carnival, Andrew, and dozens of others who'd been touched by that courtroom moment. They gathered at the VFW hall for an evening celebrating what can happen when communities come together to support those who've served. Judge Caprio stood at the podium looking out at the assembled crowd. "A year ago, a young Marine veteran walked into my courtroom facing minor violations. What he was really facing was a battle for his life. A battle with trauma, with guilt, with a system that didn't move fast enough to help him. What happened that day reminded me why I became a judge in the first place.
It's not about the law alone. It's about justice. And justice means seeing the whole person, understanding their circumstances, and doing everything in our power to help them find their way. He gestured to Marcus, who stood beside him. Marcus Webb came into my courtroom broken. Not because he was weak, but because he'd given everything he had for this country and hadn't received the support he needed in return. What happened next wasn't about me. It was about all of you. It was about a community recognizing one of their own needed help and stepping up without hesitation.
Marcus took the microphone, his voice steady and strong. A year ago, I wanted to die. I saw no future, no hope, no purpose. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. I walked into that courtroom convinced my life was essentially over. Instead, I found a room full of people who refused to let me fall. Judge Caprio didn't just dismiss my charges, he stopped everything. He made me and my struggle the priority. He mobilized an entire community around me. And because he did that, I'm standing here today alive, employed, hopeful, surrounded by brothers and sisters who keep me fighting on the hard days. Share this with a veteran right now. Let them know they're not alone. But here's what I've learned this year. My story isn't unique. There are thousands of Marcus Webbs out there. Veterans struggling with PTSD, with reintegration, with a system that moves too slowly. Veterans who feel forgotten and abandoned. Veterans who are one bad day away from giving up entirely. What happened in Judge Caprio's courtroom needs to happen everywhere, in every community, in every city. We need to see our veterans, really see them. Not just thank them for their service once a year, but actually follow through with meaningful support. He looked around the room at the faces of his fellow veterans. If you're a veteran struggling right now, please hear this. You are not alone. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not a burden. You are a warrior, dealing with wounds that aren't visible but are just as real as any physical injury. And there are people who want to help, who need to help. You just have to let them in. You just have to ask. You just have to hold on one more day. The room erupted in applause. Veterans embraced each other. Civilians approached veterans to offer thanks and support. Sarah Bradley hugged Judge Caprio, tears streaming down her face. Officer Sullivan shook Marcus's hand, both men recognizing how far they'd come from that early morning traffic stop. Andrew, the young veteran Marcus had met in the grocery store, stood up. I want to say something. When Marcus approached me that day, I was planning to end my life that night. I'd given up. I decided the pain was too much and the future was too bleak. But Marcus saw me. He recognized my struggle because he'd been there. He reached out. He offered help. He gave me hope. And now I'm here. I'm working. I'm healing. I'm paying it forward. That's what this community has taught me. We save each other. We refuse to let our brothers and sisters face the darkness alone. If you've made it this far, you need to subscribe and share this video. The evening continued with stories of transformation and healing. Veterans shared their struggles and their victories. Community members shared how they'd been inspired to get involved in veteran support. Judge Caprio announced a new initiative, working with the VFW and local mental health experts,
Health organizations to create a rapid response veteran support network that could provide immediate help to any veteran in crisis. Anthony Carnival announced that his company was creating a veteran hiring program committing to fill 30% of new positions with veterans and providing specialized support for those dealing with PTSD and other service-related conditions. The Providence Police Department announced they were implementing new training for all officers on recognizing and responding to veterans in crisis, with Officer Sullivan leading the program. And Dr. Elizabeth Warren announced she was expanding her practice to accept more veteran patients and was training other therapists in specialized PTSD treatment for combat veterans. All of this because one judge stopped everything,
to see a veteran's humanity. All of this because one community refused to let a hero fall through the cracks. All of this because people chose compassion over procedure, understanding over judgment, action over indifference. Marcus Webb stood in that VFW hall, surrounded by his brothers and sisters, his mother beaming with pride, his girlfriend Elena by his side, Sarah Bradley's boys tugging on his sleeves for attention. And he felt something profound. He felt hope. Not the naive hope of someone who hasn't been tested, but the hard-earned hope of someone who's been to the darkest places and found his way back. Leave a comment right now telling us what you're taking away from Marcus's story. That night, as the event wound down and people began heading home, Judge Caprio pulled Marcus aside one final time. "How are you doing, son?" "Really doing." Marcus smiled, and it was genuine. "I'm okay, Judge. Really okay. Some days are still hard. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still have moments where I struggle. But I'm not fighting alone anymore. And that makes all the difference." Judge Caprio nodded, his eyes glistening. "You know what the best part of this whole story is? It's not what I did. It's what you did with it. You took the help you received and multiplied it. You became for others what we were for you. That's the real miracle here. That's what changes the world. You taught me that, Judge. You showed me that one person's compassion can create ripples that spread farther than we can imagine. You saved my life, and by saving my life, you've saved Andrew's and helped dozens of others. That's your legacy." "No, son. That's our legacy. All of us together. That's what community means." They shook hands. Two men from different generations and different backgrounds, connected by a moment of human compassion in a courtroom that had become a catalyst for change. As Marcus drove home that night, he thought about how far he'd come. 12 months ago, he'd been barely surviving. Each day, a struggle to find a reason to keep going. Now, he had a job he enjoyed, relationships that sustained him, a purpose that drove him forward. He had Andrew and the others he'd helped, veterans who were alive because he'd chosen life first. If this story changed how you see veterans, share it everywhere. He thought about Tommy Bradley and the promise he'd made to live, really live, not just survive, but thrive, to make his survival mean something. He was keeping that promise now. Every day he chose to get up, to go to work, to attend the support group, to reach out to struggling veterans. He was honoring Tommy's memory. He thought about Judge Frank Caprio and that extraordinary moment when justice became more than just legal proceedings. When a judge stepped down from his bench and embraced a broken veteran and said, "You're not alone." Those words had been a lifeline in his darkest hour. He thought about his community, all those people in the courtroom that day who'd lined up to contribute money, who'd offered help, who'd seen his humanity beneath his struggles. They'd shown him what America could be at its best. Not perfect, not without problems, but willing to come together for those in need. As he pulled into his apartment complex, his phone buzzed. A text from Danny Torres. "Brother, got a call from a vet who's struggling. Can you talk to him tomorrow? He needs to hear from someone who's been there." Marcus texted back immediately. "Absolutely. Send me his number. I'll call him first thing in the morning." Because that's what you do when you've been saved. You reach back and pull others to safety. You create your own ripples. You refuse to let anyone fight alone. Subscribe, like, and comment if you believe every veteran deserves this kind of support. 2 years after Marcus Webb walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, the Veteran Support Network they'd helped create had assisted over 300 veterans in the Providence area. 12 had found employment. 73 had connected with mental health resources. 19 had been helped with housing assistance. And 8 had been talked through suicidal crises and were now thriving. Marcus had been promoted again,
now serving as Director of Veteran Services at Carnival Construction, overseeing veteran hiring and support initiatives across multiple companies that had joined the program. He'd become a public speaker, sharing his story at veteran events, community gatherings, and mental health conferences. He'd been featured in articles, podcasts, and news segments about veteran PTSD and community support. He'd proposed to Elena, and they were planning a small wedding for the following spring. Sarah Bradley and her boys would be there, as would Judge Caprio, Officer Sullivan, and the entire Tuesday night support group. Tommy Bradley's memory would be present too, honored by the man who'd kept his promise to live fully. The nightmares still came sometimes, but less frequently. The flashbacks still happened, but he had tools to manage them. The survivor's guilt still whispered in quiet moments, but he had a community to remind him that his survival was a gift, not a betrayal. That by living fully, by helping others, by being present,
In the world, he was honoring those who didn't make it home. Judge Frank Caprio, now 80 years old, kept a photograph on his desk. It was from that first VFW gathering, Marcus in the center, surrounded by his brothers, all smiling, all still fighting, all still here. Whenever the judge had a difficult case, whenever he felt the weight of his responsibilities, he would look at that photograph and remember what was possible when you stopped everything to see someone's humanity. Drop a final comment telling us one thing you're going to do differently after watching this. The story of Marcus Webb and Judge Frank Caprio became more than just a viral video. It became a blueprint for how communities could support veterans. It demonstrated the power of compassion, the importance of seeing beyond case numbers to the human beings behind them, and the extraordinary things that happen when people refuse to let heroes fall through the cracks. Marcus still attends the Tuesday night support group every week. He still connects struggling veterans with resources. He still takes calls at all hours from brothers and sisters who need someone to talk them through the darkness. He still visits Sarah and the boys once a month, keeping Tommy's memory alive through stories and presence. And every morning when he wakes up, before the day begins with all its challenges and opportunities, Marcus Webb thinks about that moment in Judge Caprio's courtroom when everything changed, when a judge stepped down from his bench, when a community surrounded him with support, when he was reminded that his life had value, that his story wasn't over, that he wasn't alone. And he gets up to face another day, not just surviving anymore, but living, really living. Keeping his promise to Tommy, he honored the second chance he'd been given, and without even realizing it, he started a ripple effect that reached far beyond one courtroom. That's what happens when someone chooses compassion over protocol. When a judge pauses the machinery of the system long enough to actually see the human being in front of him. When a community refuses to let a veteran crumble alone. Lives don't just change, they steady, they heal. They rise. Because that's the legacy Judge Frank Caprio left behind. Justice with heart, accountability with humanity, and the courage to lift those who carried the heaviest burdens for us. And if you're a veteran watching this right now, hear this clearly. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are not beyond repair. You deserve support, respect, and a community that stands with you the same way you once stood for us. Reach out. Take one step. Hold on. Just one more day. And if you're not a veteran, look closely at the world around you. There is a Marcus Webb in every neighborhood. A quiet hero fighting a silent battle, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice. Be that someone. Be the hand that steadies. Be the voice that checks in.
Be the Judge Caprio in someone's story. That's how the world changes. One act of compassion, one life lifted, one community rebuilt from the inside out. Before you go, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe stories like this matter, hit subscribe to Case Closed, so Judge Caprio's legacy of kindness and justice is carried forward, one story at a time. Share this video with someone who needs to see it,